Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prevention of Blindness Society's Tech Talk Tuesday. Today is obviously Tuesday, March 18, and it's 1 o'clock Eastern. Before we start with our session today and introducing our speaker, I only have a few announcements to make and some of our upcoming events. For tomorrow, we have our town hall meeting at 11 o'clock. Our speaker will be Stan Gowan, who is an avid traveler with vision impairment, and he will tell us about his adventures, challenges, and he has many stories to tell. So I encourage you all to join. We will send out the Zoom link tomorrow morning. It will be fun. On Thursday, Sandy will take us through a journey through our eyeballs from light to vision. And this will take place at the Friendship Heights Village. It's an in-person meeting with the low vision support group over there. It will be adventurous. Travels with Sandy.
Actually, Tara, this is Sandy. Tomorrow is the three apps. Thursday is the three apps at Friendship Heights: Seeing AI, Envision AI, and Be My Eyes. The Journey Through the Eyeball is in April.
Sorry, I apologize. I was working on the April event, so that's why it's stuck in my mind. So it's the three apps, as Sandy mentioned. If you'd like to join, you can call the Friendship Heights Village. Sandy, what's the number for that? If you have it handy, or you can write it in the chat. One last event I would like to mention is our Being the Light event, which we have usually once every 4 to 5 months. I'm very excited about this one because it's the first time that we are conducting this event in Prince George's County. We haven't been there before, so we're very excited to have this event at the Collington Retirement Community. We will send out an email on how to register. It's a friends and family connection with people who have low vision. Dr. Solomon Alabai will be the moderator, so more information to come. And now to today's Tech Talk. I'm very excited to have our speaker, Stephen Kelley from Hadley. As most of you know, we always recommend Hadley's videos, and we ourselves watch them all the time to learn how to use tech, how to do things, technology when it comes to Hadley. I would like just to share with you a short bio about Steve before I hand the mic to him. Stephen Kelley is an assistive technology specialist at Hadley. He also maintains the website lowvisiontech.com and is a regular writer for Access World and Vision Aware. Steve holds masters from University of Arkansas Little Rock in both vision rehabilitation and rehabilitation counseling. He has worked in the field of vision rehabilitation and access technology for 20 years. First as an itinerant, and I asked Steve about this word, VRT, at an agency in Southern Maine, before his current position at Hadley, working with clients remotely. Steve, welcome to our Tech Talk. If you could tell us first something about Hadley, which we only know through their website, and it's the first time I personally meet someone from Hadley. And then we will talk about some iPad accessibility features.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Tara, for inviting me, and thanks everybody for joining in today. I'm really excited. Hadley is, it sounds like a lot of folks are familiar with Hadley, but Hadley was started in 1921, so it's been around for well over 100 years by William Hadley, who was a retired high school history teacher And William Hadley lost his vision later in life, and he was trying to learn Braille and found that it was kind of challenging because there weren't a whole lot of people around who knew Braille or how to teach it. So he decided in 1921, well, I'm going to teach Braille remotely. So he was definitely on the cutting edge talking about remote learning in 1921, but that's exactly what he did. So he started getting students who wanted to learn Braille, and he did it all through the mail. And over the years, Hadley has added all kinds of different courses. Um, and here we are today. Braille still is kind of one of the bread and butter things at Hadley, but we also have all kinds of workshops, hundreds of them actually, on daily living activities, technology, recreation, Braille, as I mentioned. So we do try to have a broad array of services. And the important things to note, if you're unfamiliar with Hadley, is that membership to Hadley is no cost. So you just call the 800 number, 800-323-4238, and say, I'd like to join. And you can sign up. And then you can go to the website, and we do ask a couple of questions on the website, but I promise you it's not too painful. It's just a little bit of information about yourself, and you set up a username and a password on the website. And once you do that, once you're logged in, you can take any of our workshops as many times as you want. Again, there's no cost for them. And the other really cool thing that I think people forget about Hadley is, getting on the website sometimes is not the most comfortable thing in the world to do if you've got a recent vision loss. It can be pretty challenging. So we offer our workshops in a wide variety of other ways. So if you are not a Talking Book member, we encourage you to join up for the National Library Service. And I'm guessing most of you know all about this. You get the little Talking Book player. So we will send our workshops out on the same cartridges that go in the Talking Book player. We'll send the workshops in large print or on Braille. And again, there's no charge for those either. So for example, you can, once you become a member, you can just call the 800 number and say, hey, I'd really like to get the workshop on the low vision features of my iPhone or iPad, or the low vision features of the Android phone, just as an example. So really, just about all of our different workshops are available that way. And all of the Braille workshops are available as well in workbooks and in audio. So that's, in a nutshell, that's how it works. And the website is now, it used to be hadley.edu, but we've changed it. It's hadleyhelps.org, HADLEYHELPS.org. So that will get you over to Hadley. And also, one of the other nice things about Hadley is that we can, if you're not a member of the National Library Service, we can get you signed up. We've got applications there, and we'll fill out those applications. And we can also get you connected with Bookshare, which is, another nice service that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So do we have any questions? Tara, do you want to save
I
all questions to the end?
yes, I put the website and the phone number for Hadley in the
Okay.
chat for
Okay.
people.
Very good.
Okay.
I'm just going to find my place again here.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit about we're going to talk about the low vision features of the iPhone and the iPad. And all of this, well, even I I'm laughing because I've talked to a lot of people, and whenever you start talking about the smartphones, there's often a lot of confusion. And the reason for the confusion is it's pretty confusing. Some of these smart devices, if you're new to them. Um, so they've got all kinds of different features. And the one feature that seems like it causes a lot of difficulty is Siri. So I'm going to mention Siri at some point, But what I'd like you to do as we go through this is I just want you to think of Siri as a digital assistant. Siri doesn't read stuff on the web page. Siri, think secretary when you think of Siri. Siri might be able to open an app on the phone or whatever, but Siri's not gonna read anything to you. And I think when we start talking about screen readers or spoken content, there's a lot of confusion about Siri. The other note that I would have is that pretty much everything that I'm going to talk about here is listed mostly in our workshop. It's called the iPhone and iPad Low Vision Features series. And I'll touch ever so briefly on voiceover a little bit later. And that's comes from the workshop series, Listen with VoiceOver. And each one of them has about 8 or 9 workshops in them. And I should mention that our workshops are really intended for the most part to be introductory series. So our focus is going to be on the very basics. So for example, the low vision workshop series has got about 8 or 9 um, short audio, video workshops. I want to say um, none of them are much longer than 7 or 8 minutes. So really your time investment is only going to be about an hour for either one of these, although there will be plenty of practice involved. So let's take a look at some of the low vision features. And you're going to find most of your low vision features under settings and then accessibility. That's where you're going to find most of everything that we talk about. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is under settings, accessibility. It's in the display and text sizes. Now,
Uh,
go ahead.
Sorry, Steve, if you're not showing your iPad, do you want my colleague to open her iPad and
It really depends
um,
on the audience. If you think it would be helpful, that would be awesome. Sure.
yeah. So what does everyone prefer? Do you want to see the iPad as well? The screen, would that help?
No.
Yes.
Yeah. Rachel, can you? Yes.
I was going to say, Tara, we're not going to dive too deeply into this
Okay.
stuff.
Well,
I
I
kind
can
of just,
follow along if you
yeah,
want. Why don't
that's
why don't I
fine.
share, give me one, I'll share my screen and
Oh,
I'll
sure.
try to catch up to you.
I'm trying to, so I tend not to
Oh,
dig too deeply into this stuff. I
okay.
would like to touch the surface to get just to give people an idea of what can be done. And then I'm
Okay.
hoping people go back and do it on their own and dig a little bit deeper.
Okay, then let's keep it this way, and people can listen to the YouTube
Sure.
anyway later on, and they can
Yeah.
do that. Okay.
Yeah. So I think one of the first groupings, and again, I'm not going to cover all of them, but in the display and text sizes, we're going to find things like bold text. And it goes without saying, it just makes the text a little bit bolder. I know on my iPad, I certainly have it turned on because it does help. Then there's a setting for larger text. And one of the cautions that I have about larger text, and I should also say I too have larger text turned on my iPad as well, but I have noticed that some of the apps and some web pages, when you have the larger text maximized, um, it starts to bunch words up on some of the apps. They're just not designed for the larger text. So you're going to have to play that one by ear. I mean, go ahead and adjust it, but don't be surprised if you get to a website or an app where you have the text no longer appears normal. It's kind of bunched together. So then you'll have to back it off. But that's one of the downsides of the larger text. Let's see. Then you can also increase the contrast. And again, that's something I've done on mine. I find it really helpful. Another really helpful one, which is kind of confusing, is one that's called reduce transparency. Now, Apple, I can't speak for Apple. This is just my guess. But the whole notion of the transparency in the displays, that gives it some of those great colors and some of the great effects that, if you've got really good vision, I'm sure those things are really cool and worth seeing. Um, I myself and a lot of people I can live without those. I would rather have more opaqueness, which lends itself to contrast. So I click on the reduce transparency, and I think that that does make things a little bit easier for those of us who have low vision. Brightness, and that kind of goes without saying. We can adjust it, and each one of us is different. Some people are going to be very glare sensitive, so you're going to want to back off on that brightness. Others of us really need the brightness in order to see. So that's one to take a look at. You may find that just adjusting the brightness on your iPad or iPhone makes a huge difference. The other really important one, I think, for some folks is inverting colors. And there are two ways to invert colors, at least on the newer models. There's one called, I think it's called classic invert, and then there's smart invert. So here's the difference. Smart invert is going to recognize when there's an image on the screen, like if you're on a web page or something like that, and it's not going to change the colors, hopefully. It's going to leave the colors in an image just the way they are, but it will probably invert everything else. So then the text becomes white and the background becomes black. Now, for some of us, that's super helpful. Classic invert just turns, just changes inverts the colors on everything. So you do see like a lot of white on black, and the images may be indistinguishable at that point. But if your focus is really just on trying to read some of this, it may not matter a whole lot. So those are some of the basic ones that I wanted to cover. Now, the important thing I think to note for some of these now, there are some folks out there who are just going to delight in going to settings, accessibility, and starting to dig into all of these. And then there are others of us who could live without that. We we just we want to change the settings and do it as quickly and easily as possible. Now, this is where we can call on our secretary, Siri. Siri will do some of these and sadly not all. But the ones that I know that she does do is that you can ask Siri to invert the colors. And it's just, you either press in and hold the long button, or if you've got a home button, and then you tell Siri what you want to do, like invert color. Or the other one that will work is increase or decrease brightness. Or if you've got Hey Siri set up, it's the same, just Hey Siri, increase the brightness, or Hey Siri, um, uh, decrease the brightness, or, whichever one you're trying to dive into. So that can be super handy. Now, one of the common things that I hear from people when I'm on the phone with them is, um, I've already gone in and I've adjusted the text size to the largest text size that I can, and I still can't see it. And that's not unusual, because the largest text size, when you change the text size, you can change it to the largest text size and set it to bold, and it still can be too small for you. It is for me. So for those of us who are in that boat, we're going to want to go to another setting, and that setting is called Zoom. And Zoom is basically the built-in screen magnifier on the iPhone and the iPad. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to turn on Zoom in your settings. Once it's on, you chances are you're not going to see any change. It's still, the screen's going to be there, and you're going to go, oh, this didn't work. In order to get Zoom up, what you want to do is you want to take three fingers and double tap the screen. And when you're using that gesture of the three finger double tap, make sure that you have a little bit of space between your fingers, because if you hold your fingers together, then the iPad or the iPhone almost sees that as just one big finger. So it won't work that way. So just give it a little bit of space. So there are two ways that Zoom works. when you first take those 3 fingers and do a double tap on the screen, it's going to increase the magnification on the screen. And what that means is you're going to see a smaller portion of the screen, but it's going to be larger. So all of a sudden you won't see the full screen. The second, and then if you do the same gesture again, the 3-finger double tap, it's going to take you right back to normal, or unmagnified. Now there's a way to adjust zoom, and the way that you want to adjust zoom is that gesture. If you're not familiar with it, it's a little bit more challenging. You want to do a double tap, but on the second tap, you're going to hold it on the screen. So tap, tap, and hold. And then once you're on the screen, if you want to increase the magnification, you're going to slide all those 3 fingers out to the edge or towards the top. That's going to increase the screen size. Or you want to drag those 3 fingers in towards the center or down towards the bottom of the screen, and that's going to decrease the magnification. And wherever you happen to take your fingers off, once you kind of set the magnification where you want, when you take your 3 fingers and do that double tap again, it's still going to remove it. When you do the double tap again, it's going to bring you right back to that magnification that you had set. So that's in general, that's how the whole zoom feature works. Now, one of the things that I want to suggest to people, I realize that if this is your first time using it, it's going to take some practice just to get zoom turned on, turned off, and also increasing and decreasing the magnification. That will take a little bit of practice. The next thing that's going to take a little bit of practice is using it. So for example, what do I mean by that? I'm somebody who has low vision myself. So but I primarily use my vision to navigate, certainly on my iPad. And a lot of the times I'm just going to be looking at the screen without magnification because I know where some of my icons are. I know how to get to the mail and that sort of thing. Where I really need the magnification is once I open something, if I want to look at the details or if I want to try to read any of the text on it, that's when I need that magnification. So what I find that I'm doing is I am constantly magnifying, increasing and decreasing the magnification. And at first, I have to say it's probably going to feel pretty clumsy. But the more you do it and the more you kind of get used to adjusting that magnification as you need it, the more it becomes second nature for you. And I think that's when the real beauty of that zoom feature comes in terms of being able to zoom in when you want and zoom out when you need to. So I would encourage anybody who's new to the zoom to just kind of keep playing with it and trying it and seeing how it works for you. And it will take a little bit of time, I think. Um, Now, in the zoom feature itself, there's not quite 500,000, but there's a bunch of different settings. And again, I'm going to talk about kind of the major settings here. So we have one that's the default, and that's full screen. That's the one I happen to like to use, but I know a lot of people don't like full screen because you're not seeing the whole screen. You have to take those 3 fingers and move around on the screen to find something maybe in the top left corner. When you have it magnified, you don't see that top left corner or the top right corner. So you kind of have to move your fingers around, and you do that with those 3 fingers. You just keep them on the screen and move it around until you find what you're looking for. And again, it takes a little bit of practice, but that's the full screen view. You also have a window view, and the window view is going to be more like having, let's say, a square that you move around the window as you go along. So for example, maybe you see most everything on the display just fine, but you want to have like a virtual magnifying glass that you just move around the screen. That's the window view. And what you would do is once that's up, again, you kind of move your finger around to move that magnifying glass or that window, and you can do all kinds of adjustments to the window, make it larger, smaller, increase the zoom, everything else that you can do in full screen. The third way of using the magnifier or zoom is by creating a portion of the screen that's magnified. And I think they called this, they call it window or pinned, where it stays in one place. So imagine for a moment that you've got the top quarter of your screen is your window that's magnified. So as you're moving things around on the page, if you look in that top quarter of the screen, that's where things are going to be magnified. So what you would do then, if you're trying to read something and you need a little magnification, you just move that section of the document up to that quarter of the screen where you can read it. And as you move it through, back and forth, you'll see different sections of the document in that window. So those are the three primary ways that you're going to be able to increase or use Zoom. And the important thing to note about the Zoom feature is that once you've got Zoom on, you literally can make the display almost you can make it so large it's almost useless. So you could really increase the display to the point where you only have a couple of letters filling up the entire screen. And at that point, really, it's not very efficient. But just to give you an idea of what you can do with Zoom, and it usually keeps everything very sharp in focus. It's not pixelated or blurry, so it's a really cool feature. Um, I'm just kind of going through my notes here for a moment. Yeah.
Steve, shall we see if there are questions?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at those.
Mhm. Any questions from anyone? Just raise your hands or unmute yourselves. I guess there are no questions.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, wait, I have
Either
a question.
okay.
I have
Okay,
a
please.
question.
Okay.
I was interrupted while you were talking about having the top quarter of the screen. It would be what was the Zoom, and you can kind of scroll through. How did you get there?
That's in Zoom, and you
In
have
Zoom.
you have three different ways that you can set up Zoom. You can have it as full screen,
Okay.
you can have it as window, and then I believe that that's called pinned, where you actually have
Okay.
just you have a specific portion of the display that's going to stay in one place, and that becomes your magnification window. So it's kind of,
Okay.
yeah, it's kind of like the idea of that handheld magnifier, the window, but what you've done with the window is you just pin it in one place on your display so it doesn't move. And
Oh,
you kind of
okay.
move the document, towards it.
Okay.
So it's a different way. It's one of my least favorite, but don't take my word for it. I find that way kind of confusing, but I
Oh,
suspect that
okay.
there are people who absolutely love that
So you
that
like the
method.
full screen
I like the
Zoom.
full
Okay.
screen, but
Okay.
I've also heard from folks that they find that confusing because
All right.
it's a little hard to see all of the items that are on the screen at one
Okay.
time. You're only seeing a portion of the screen at a time.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Any other questions?
Uh, Tara, I have a question, but it's not about the Zoom. It's there was a reference to Siri, Stephen, just
Yeah.
10 minutes earlier. And lately I noticed I asked something simple of Siri, and Siri will say, here's what I found on the web, and displays it in writing
Right.
and I said, what good is this?
Yeah.
What is this something that I need to do to fix this?
No, and you ask the same question I ask sometimes when Siri does that too. It's like, what's the point? And you know, and I guess in a sense, that's one of the reasons I preface this by saying, think of Siri as a secretary, and I find that fairly incomplete. You know, I like, for example, on the Android devices where you use the Google Assistant, oftentimes I find that the Google Assistant will give you maybe a little bit more complete information. Although there are times when the Google Assistant says, "Oh, here's what I found," and you've got a nice little list of things that are in print, and it doesn't say anything.
But I
Um,
think this is something that started happening recently. It wasn't like that.
yeah, it has gotten a little bit tighter. I don't think Siri. I think Siri has been that way for some time. Now you could call Apple accessibility if you wanted, just to see if there is some adjustment in Siri. I don't think that there is, but I'm not an Apple expert. A lot of times I do defer to the Apple accessibility phone number.
I thank you.
Effie,
Yeah.
Effie,
Yes.
what I did after, the update, it enabled Apple Intelligence automatically. So when you disable Apple Intelligence, you would get the Siri back to what it was before. Like it used to read for you.
Oh, how do you do that?
You just go to settings and Apple Intelligence and disable it over
Okay.
there. Yeah,
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tara.
sure.
Oh,
And
that is
there
good
is,
news.
I think, Janice, you have a raised hand.
Yeah, in advance, I apologize for the background noise, so I'll try to be quick. Yeah,
Okay.
sometimes Google, I use Google, I'm sorry, but I can always pick up things when I listen to Apple presentations. But the Google Assistant will do that as well. Sometimes it'll say, "This is what I found on the web." It's like, whoa, what does it say? So a lot of times I'll use my Echo device and it, you know, Alexa will read, so Alexa doesn't do that. So that's just another alternative.
Thank you, Janice.
Yeah, I have to agree too, because I find, because I've got different devices around the house, that, if we get that from Siri, then sometimes I'll go to the Android phone and say, "Okay, Google, what do you think about this?" Or then we'll, like you said, we'll turn on one of the smart speakers and try it there. So if nothing else, it just kind of, I find that part of this is just kind of fine tuning our question. And sometimes you can reword the question, I think, with Siri or any of the digital assistants, in a way that, oh, now I'll get a response, like, no, give me the number, or spell it out for me, or something like that. So I think, trying the question in a different way sometimes is super helpful.
And we have a question in the chat about Siri. She has never used it, so what can it do for me? How can Siri help?
Well, I think it depends on the individual. Yeah, it just kind of depends on what it is that you're asking. So, for example, speaking of all this chat about Google and stuff, it looks like I've got Google chatting with me. Um, with Siri, I think, for example, Siri can open apps, and Siri can sometimes change some of these settings for us. So I think and I think, and on the iPhone, for example, you can make a phone call with Siri. So there are kind of some limited areas, but some of these areas are really make life a lot easier using the device. But it's just important to recognize that there are some limitations.
And I think Harry has a raised hand.
Yes, I
Harry?
do. Thank you. I have a question about composing emails on the iPad.
Mhm.
Somehow I turned on this feature where the text is inverted, like it's white on black,
Yeah.
and I can't turn off that feature. Maybe you just give me a suggestion how to change it back to its normal composing mode.
Yeah, well, I would try Siri, just and say to Siri, invert the colors, and see if that if that does it. And it is also one of the settings that's under text and display. And you may
Okay.
find that you just have accidentally turned that on. But I do think if you ask Siri to invert the colors, it'll go back to what you're accustomed to, black text on a white background.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Okay, Steve. We're good.
Okay. Yeah. So, now even so, for example, again, I'll use myself as an example. So I've got Zoom turned on, and yeah, now I've got the text nice and big. So I've got like 2 or 3 lines on the screen, and frankly, it oftentimes takes me forever to read something that way, or my eyes get tired. So the magnification, even though it's wonderful, where it's useful, it's not particularly efficient. So that's when we might turn to something like spoken content. And spoken content is another one of those areas in the settings, accessibility. If you go down to spoken content, you have a couple of ways to do that. And here I'm just going to talk about a couple of things at the risk of confusing everybody really quickly. The iPhone and iPad has something called a screen reader. Which is technically not spoken content, even though that's what it does. A screen reader um, changes the way the gestures are used on the iPhone and the iPad, but the idea behind a screen reader is it allows you to use the device without being able to see anything on the display. So it will read everything that's on the screen in a wide variety of ways. And I'm not going to go into it a whole lot, other than to say that um, the screen reader is a really great feature and worth looking into if you're having a great deal of difficulty reading the screen. It's probably time to consider learning a little bit more about voiceover. But for a lot of us, the only time that we really need a little bit of help is like when we're trying to read an email or a web page or something like that. Maybe most of the rest of the time we could find our way around, we get where we need to go. It's just the reading that's challenging. So these features called spoken content are really great because they don't involve all the changes in the gestures. I know when you first try them, you're going to go, oh, he said these were easy to use and user friendly, and they're kind of challenging. They're, but they're still quite a bit scaled down from what you would get with voiceover. So under spoken content, you're going to find two major versions of it. One is called speak menu. Or I'm sorry, speak selection. And speak selection, basically what happens when you turn speak selection on, I mean, it's very subtle. Once you go and you select text, so for example, let's say you wanted to read a document to you or something like that, or maybe just a paragraph in a document or a paragraph in a web page. So if you select the paragraph, you'll notice that once it's selected, a menu comes up, and the menu comes up all the time. But this time, now that you've got speak selection uh, enabled, one of those menu items is going to be speak. So when you click on speak, it's going to read that paragraph to you. And there are, other settings that you can select in there. You can have it highlight the words as it speaks. You can have it set the rate of speech as it speaks. You can even choose the voice when it speaks. So, that's the part of this where I say, yeah, if you want to dig a little bit further down, you have all of those settings. But the major thing to remember is that you do have a way to speak selection. And then the next item under spoken content is speak screen. And it's the same sort of an idea, except this one uses a gesture. And when you have speak screen turned on, it will literally do just what it says. When you use a 2-finger gesture, and you take your 2 fingers and just kind of flick down the screen at the top, just a quick flick, you don't have to slide your fingers all the way down the screen, just kind of flick them down. Again, keep your fingers a little bit separated. And what happens when you do that is a small dialog box will open up on the screen, and it begins reading from the top of the screen to the bottom. And on the dialog box, you have play pause, you have a fast forward, or kind of like a rewind where it skips back. And you've also got a way to close the dialog box and a way to select the rate. The default rate is 1x, but you can speed it up 2x, 3x, and I also believe that you can slow it down. And just like speak selection, you can also choose the voice that you want. You can set the automatic rate of speech. So you can do a wide variety of things with it. You can also have it highlight text as it reads along. So these two features, they're really great, and it takes a little. I think it takes a little getting used to when you first turn them on. Um, you know, it's going to take a little bit of practice. But for doing those everyday tasks like reading an email or reading a web page or just kind of rereading a document, they can be super helpful. Um, the one downside, and you might ask when you try these, well, gee, why would I even use something like VoiceOver, the full featured screen reader? Neither one of these things will allow you to do any kind of editing, um, audible sort of editing. Um, all they're going to do is they're going to read from start to finish or pause and continue. The nice thing about a screen reader is that it gives you a little bit more flexibility. So if you want to do a few more advanced things, like if you're trying to edit a document and you want to be able to do it by listening to the document, listening to the characters and that sort of thing in a word, that's when you want to go to the screen reader. So I've kind of touched a little bit on voiceover. The only other thing that I would share with voiceover, and I occasionally use voiceover, even though for the most part I use these other um, spoken content features more. I will switch over to voiceover when I'm reading a long document or when I'm reading something related to research, because voiceover allows me to read line by line, maybe sentence by sentence, and I can also go back quickly to a sentence. I could read the sentence, word by word again, or actually go back a word. So you can really get fairly advanced with the way you're reading the document using voiceover. The other thing for people who, excuse me, people who want to experiment a little bit with voiceover, um, first of all, know that you're going to get lost. You're going to get lost quickly because it does change things pretty quickly in the way that you use your device. Just know if you're using Siri, you can say to Siri, turn voiceover on, and more importantly, turn voiceover off. So you can always use Siri to kind of get voiceover shut down in the background. I've spoken to a number of people who have voiceover on, can't get it turned off, and it can be it can lead to an exciting adventure. So that's kind of where I'll leave it for the time being. And like I said, both of those, we do have a workshop series on both of these, the low vision features and the on voiceover. And for people who are thinking about, just checking those things out, I would really encourage you to, get a copy of the workshop. And I really think it's super helpful to get it as a talking book cartridge if you're a talking book user, because that way you're not using the same device that you're trying to learn with. I think that can be super challenging. This way, you just play and pause using your talking book device, and you can experiment a little bit as you go along. So, Tara,
Yeah.
I'll leave it for open for any questions that people might have.
Great. Thank you, Steve. This
Oh,
was
it's my
great.
pleasure. My pleasure.
Rachel, I think you have a comment on
I do.
to
So
make
let
Siri
me,
more friendly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I, there are some settings that can get Siri to start talking to you again. And this seems to keep happening with the updates. And so it's not perfect, but I'm going to walk you through those. And I just did a little chat GPT on iOS 18 to see if there's issues. And apparently there have been people reporting that it's not talking as much. And the suggestion on chat GPT was to read, if you're having trouble, to retrain Siri with your voice. But that said, there is a setting, and I noticed on my own phone that when I did the update, it defaulted back to automatic. So every time you update your phone, you need to reset this setting. Otherwise, when you ask Siri questions, again, it's going to show you answers. So what you do, and I can share my screen or I'll just talk you through it. If you go into your settings and you go down to the Siri settings, which is under, it's called Apple Intelligence and Siri, which is on my device directly under accessibility. So it's right under where we just were with all these other settings. And then you scroll down within Apple Intelligence and Siri. One of the options is under voice, it says Siri responses. So if you select that, the default is automatic, which means Siri makes the decision about whether giving you a silent response, which is visual, or a spoken response. But you can select prefer spoken response. So if you select prefer spoken response, then if it can give you a spoken response, it will. Now, sometimes when I use Siri, I still don't get a spoken response, but once I selected that setting, I got the response verbally much more frequently. And Tara, I have not disabled Apple Intelligence. So, maybe that then would give me everything spoken, but I didn't seem to have to do that to get spoken responses. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, Rachel, Effie's issue was the responses that Siri was giving. I mean, they are all audio, but the type of responses was not very
not that
convincing.
So the issue
Well,
wasn't that you were getting a visual response only, it's that the response itself was less than helpful. Is that it?
I have to say that I have only an iPhone 13. So maybe I think that the Apple Intelligence showed up at 18. I thought I don't even have that option, but I went under Siri and I found that there is an option that says prefer spoken.
Right.
In my 13, Apple 13. But I think that this doesn't do it, obviously. There's something else that this phone cannot accommodate because I have it on as prefer spoken.
Okay. I just know that every time I run an update on my phone, it defaults me back to automatic instead of prefer spoken. And I have to go in and I have to fix that. Otherwise, I ask Siri a question and it says, I found something you might be interested in. And it just gives me like a link to a website, which of course I can't see. So I thought maybe it was as simple as just selecting prefer spoken responses. So maybe not.
Thank you, though.
Have you promoted Apple accessibility with your group?
Yeah, sometimes we give them the phone number.
Got it.
For
Okay.
people to.
I gave it out 3 times yesterday.
I was just going to say it's one of the frequent numbers that I give out too. So that and that's a great way to double check on some of these things. Depending on which model you have, they're going to know the answer to it, and they're usually super helpful.
I don't have the map. I'm sorry. Somebody put the
Yeah,
Apple accessibility?
I will put it in the chat now.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Any other questions for Steve? It's a quiet group today. Oh, what
Yeah.
is Apple accessibility phone number? Okay, let me find it. I don't know where it disappeared.
I think it's 877-204-3930 if memory serves.
Yes.
Sometimes it doesn't, but
877. Yeah, I found it. Yeah. 204-3930. Yeah, that's correct. Any other questions?
I used the Amazon accessibility line with a client yesterday too. So maybe we should like publish all those lines because they're all very helpful.
That's true. If you have any problems with your Alexa, call Amazon. Especially, they will start, you can hear your talking books through Alexa shortly. So Steve, I guess we don't have any other questions. Thank you very much for joining us today.
oh, it was a pleasure.
And now we have a face that we can connect to Hadley, because many of us have been to the website, but it's the first time we meet someone from Hadley. And hopefully we'll meet others from Hadley as well. And we will have you again as our speaker. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was going to say, please feel free to call the 800 number and ask for Steve if you'd like to speak to me personally. I'm happy to field any calls and follow up.
Thank you. Thank you
My
very
pleasure.
much, everyone,
Thanks
for
having
joining
me.
us today. Okay, thank you.
Bye.
This has been helpful. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.